course, one of the biggest names available is Russell Wilson. The Broncos have already given Russell permission to begin speaking with and meeting with other teams. So for all intents and purposes, his free agency has already begun. Everyone in the world is offering an assessment of where he is right now, including our Ryan Clark yesterday.
When you look at last year and the way that he adjusted his game to fit what Sean Payton wanted, he did those things. And let's remember, Bailey Zappi finished as a starter.
Right.
Garner Minshew finished as a starter. Aiden O'Connell finished as a starter.
Right.
And so now we're going to look at Russell Wilson and say Russell Wilson can't be a starter, right? No, lies you tell.
Lies you tell.
There's nothing I love more than an exasperated Ryan Clark. And before we go in, I want everyone to hear, this is what I promised you in the open, something about Russell that I just hadn't heard anybody say until Mike Tannebaum said it in our meeting this morning, that I think will put a lot of other things into perspective, particularly from a Broncos side of things. Mike T., what is it you reminded us all?
Greeny, the Denver Bronco contract extension with Russell Wilson actually starts right now this year. When he was traded from Seattle to Denver in that blockbuster trade in 2022, there was no deal that was done with Russell Wilson. That was done in April, and then in late August, August 31st, they signed that massive extension that included $124 million in fully guaranteed money. So they could have obviously just acquired their player for multiple first-round picks, Noah Fant, Drew Lock, etc., and just had to play out the last 2 years. They would have zero cap dollar hit. Now they have an $85 million dead money hit because of that extension.
That's the point. The Russell Wilson extension actually starts now.
Right.
So you want to talk about making your own bed at a moment in which the Broncos have expressed to Russell Wilson that their greatest and fondest wish is that he goes somewhere else. This is the moment the extra money actually kicks in on Russell Wilson. I hadn't heard it pointed out that way. But look, let's face it, everybody, right? When we're talking about Russell Wilson, we're not just talking about him as a player. RC can talk about, well, can he start and all that stuff. We know that with him, there was just so much more to it. And here's one voice yesterday that gives you an indication of why. Karl Mecklenburg was a really good player on the Broncos a long time ago, 6-time Pro Bowler in the 80s and the 90s. And he weighed in on all of this on Twitter. I want you to see what he tweeted. He tweeted, Russell Wilson isn't a leader. The foolishness that went on in his first year at Denver with a private coach, his own office at the facility, family at training camp, when other players didn't have those privileges, proved his self-centeredness. There's a former Bronco with a pretty strong opinion that has nothing to do with whether Russell Wilson is still good enough to be a starter or not. The question is that fair or is that over the top? D. Wood, what's the answer?
I think we just gotten too far off the track right now. It just seems like everyone's just piling on. Piling on for what? Like, we all know that stuff happened, in year one. There was a lot of things that was wrong with the Denver Broncos in year one. Nathaniel Hackett was awful. The team was awful. Yeah, all that stuff happened. But then this past year with Sean Payton, and we knew going into the thing, that marriage wasn't that was oil and water between those two. Mm-hmm. But I thought Russell Wilson acquitted himself quite well because clearly Sean Payton, the way he wants his quarterback to play and the way Russell Wilson's game is, they aren't compatible. But Russell Wilson found a way to play some pretty good football. I'm not saying Russell Wilson was top 10, but he played some pretty good football. And so when I hear comments like that on Twitter or all this other stuff from other people, it's just gotten ridiculous in my opinion. People are just piling on there.
Fair game or too much?
Oh, no. That's wild. I think that is wild because, I think it's the perfect example of what we heard RG3 say this week about it's in vogue to sort of criticize Russ, the player, and go in. But I do think it's fine to critique the on-the-field player, to dissect the trade, to discuss where he fits next, right? And be very honest about the skill set and where he could fit. That is fine. But Sean Payton didn't show leadership when he was berating Russell on the sideline or when he was asking him to take a pay cut when they still were in the midst of a playoff run. So I think personality aside, Russell, when I talk to offensive coaches, they say, yes, he can still play, but he's not the same guy. He may want you want more freedom in the pocket to sort of freestyle. And if that's not what you want, with an aging quarterback, you might think it's better for us to reset with a young kid. Like, there's so many variables in place that actually warrant discussion, more so than the guy had his own office.
I get it, but I feel like that is part of this story, Domonique, because Russell Wilson is not just being evaluated for how he plays. That is one discussion. It feels like that discussion is in one silo, and this other one is in an entirely different silo. And I think this one, what Mecklenburg is voicing, and look, I think it's much too much, but he's entitled to his opinion and he's entitled to say it. I feel like that is actually guiding where this thing has gone much more than the play. What do you think of all this, Neek?
I mean, we don't live in a fair society. We don't play on teams where things are fair. When guys are great, they get better considerations, and Russ was great. And when you're not good, those considerations that you have acquired, those privileges you've acquired, get thrown in your face. Like, this is not a new equation for us. But the equation going forward for Russ is the next team. Does Russ expect, like, special privileges? And is his play going to warrant those special privileges? I think that's the equation that the teams who are acquiring Russ need to find out when they're interviewing him is how does he expect to be treated? Does he anticipate being a guy who comes in as name the starter and be a long-term solution for a team? If that's what he thinks, then I would have some reservations about bringing him in. Does he consider himself someone who needs to come and improve himself and maybe even be like a temporary stopgap quarterback to the next one? Then it'd be something I consider. But I think it's a question for the GMs and people like Mike Tannebaum who'll be making this decision coming up. But it's not as simple as, is he good enough to play? Because I think we all think he's like one of the 32 best quarterbacks alive right now. Yeah, but there are other things that come along with Russell Wilson on your team. It's not just him on the field like some sort of video game.
He's not Brett Favre, but when we had Brett Favre at the Jets, Brett Favre had his own locker. He showered someplace differently. Russell Wilson is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. They gave up, as we already talked about, a ton of money and draft choices, and you want him to be able to go into the facility and be able to study when he wants. And everybody in the media on a one-off basis, hey, can we just get one thing? Or sometimes it's actually a teammate. Can you just sign one more autograph? So when you're at that level, and again, I'm not saying he was Brett Favre, but he is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, face of the franchise. You want them to have an environment, Greeny, where they could study, they could be there and have some peace and quiet. So I think Mecklenburg was wrong. And I think moving forward, to me, here's what's fascinating. What does Russell Wilson want? Because I think in the next week, he's going to see that no one's going to give him any money in 2025, meaning he'll make as much money this year not to play as to play. And I'm fascinated to see what does Russell Wilson do? How much does he want to play?
Let's be clear, the most attractive thing about Russell Wilson right now is the fact that you can get him for cheap, right? It is the money. It's not necessarily the play. But when Mike is talking about Brett Favre, when the Jets signed Brett Favre, what was the expectation? We're trying to win Super Bowls with Brett Favre.
Right.
When you sign Russell Wilson right now, what is the expectation? We know what the Broncos were hoping for with their second choice, but I don't think you signed Russell Wilson thinking, yeah, we're winning a chip. Like, I think that's the difference.
No,
he can still play, but I think to Dominique's point earlier, when you are a fantastic player, you'll put up with more. But honestly, you just need Russell to sort of be a stopgap or a bridge to something else.
Obviously, what you're saying is obviously 100% right, and no one is putting him in that category anymore. The degree to which his standing has diminished is incredible over the course of 2 years. All I'm trying to say is at some point, it starts to feel like it's gone too far. Like, it starts to feel like this is just completely unfair. Yes. We treat Russell Wilson like he has done horrible things. Yeah. We treat people who people who have been known to do far worse things than Russell Wilson would ever consider. We treat them with a great deal more respect than we treat Russell. And I can't believe I'm sitting here defending him because I feel like I've been very critical of his play. Yeah. But the degree to which we're now questioning everything about him, D. Wood, quick final thought. Just to me, it feels like it's much too much.
Yeah, it just feels personal. When you hear these comments like, Karl Mecklenburg and, a variety of other people who've chimed in on Russell Wilson, it feels personal. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we need to judge Russell by his game. What is he doing out there on the field? And ultimately, I think Russell Wilson, and I'm going to just go back to this, Russell Wilson will have to make as much, like how much does he love the game of football?
Yeah.
That, to me, is going to be the determining factor of how everything is going to play out moving forward with his career.
Yeah, as Mike T said, he doesn't need it anymore, so it's just really up to whether he wants it